Muhammad wa ala ali Sayyidina Muhammadin wa barik wa sallim. Alhamdulillah, once again, tonight we have an amazing program. This is part of the series, Mindful Muslim series. 2 weeks ago, we did the first part. This is the second part, inshallah, and we're going to have the third part. And if possible, we might have part 4 as well, inshallah, depending on the speaker's availability. Tonight, we will be talking about the power of forgiveness and overcoming trauma and healing through forgiveness. And as always, as part of the first series, we have Dr. Arif Shoaib. He is a psychiatrist here based in Sugarland with over 20 years of experience. And we are so happy and glad to have him. He brings both the psychological, scientific, medical perspective, as well as the Islamic perspective as well. So I don't have to speak much. He takes care of my part too, alhamdulillah. And we also have Miss Terry Kolhan. She is first time at our center. So first and foremost, welcome to Brand Lane Islamic Center, Masjid al-Sabirin. Thank you for being here today. She is LPC, Master's Therapist, Counselor with over 20 years of experience. And she has an office and here in the Sugarland as well. And she works in the same offices together in Dr. Arif Shoaib's office. And we are so happy and glad that she could make it today. Thank you so much for being here, Ms. Terry. So she's going to cover the therapeutic and from a counseling perspective as well, inshallah. We're going to start right away. And we are going to also have a Q&A towards the end. Every speaker will be giving about 15 to 20 minutes, inshallah. And I already did my part today during the Jummah khutbah, so I don't need to really repeat myself. But if needed, inshallah, I can chime in as needed. But inshallah, all after the presentation, we'll do a Q&A as well, inshallah. So I'm going to pass on the mic to Dr. Shoaib. Inshallah, he'll be doing the PowerPoint presentation.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Sheikh, thank you very much. Jazakallah khair for a wonderful introduction. I can never take your position. I can just kind of dabble a little bit, maybe a little bit, but I expect you to really give the detailed perspective, Islamic perspective. I think that we all know, mashallah, you're very knowledgeable and you know what you're talking about. And actually, I can say by now you have learned enough psychology that I can just give you the slide deck and you can do the presentation. So, all right, without further ado, let's get started. So we're going to talk about a power of forgiveness as a path to personal growth and well-being. We all have had experiences in life where we have been, betrayed or hurt by other people, sometimes knowingly, sometimes unknowingly. And there are times where we have the ability to actually respond or fight back. And there are times where the perpetrator is just too powerful for us to do anything about it. So how do we handle that? How do we deal with that? We feel angry, we feel resentful when something bad happens to us after a bad experience. So anger is a natural emotion. We all know that. I don't think there's anybody in this room that has never experienced anger. And then, this emotion can be used positively or negatively. It can have serious consequences if we do not use it properly. So it affects both our psychologically and physiologically. Psychologically is what pertains to our minds, and physiological is how it pertains to our general health. So the physical nature of anger, the effects on our body, what happens is when we're really, really angry, we're really, really upset, it activates amygdala, which is part of the brain that deals with emotions. So when the amygdala gets affected, what happens is it triggers extreme response. Extreme response meaning you are either going to stand and fight or you're going to run away. Okay. And this response is not normal in an average person. When you're dealing with a situation, when you have that response, you're not able to handle the situation. What it does is it suppresses the prefrontal cortex. That's the front, like in part of the brain and the front of the brain that controls our emotions, helps us with making plans, executing the plans, and dealing with things. But what happens is that when this part gets suppressed, then we become more impulsive. We act on impulse without thinking about the consequences. Somebody says something to you, instead of responding to them, you may hit them, or instead of responding to them, you may just run away. When people are in that kind of mode, when they have a lot of adrenaline going through their body, it disrupts the memory. A little bit of adrenaline is good. It makes us do things. Too much adrenaline, it disrupts. So we are not able to remember things. So a lot of times when people have been traumatized, PTSD victims, when you ask them about the details of certain events that caused the trauma, they're not able to remember it. Why? Because they had too much adrenaline in their system at that time. So it affects the attention, affects the emotional regulation, and ability to function in general. So our Prophet ﷺ, has advised us against anger, right? There's a hadith where a man came to Prophet and said, "O Messenger of Allah, give me advice." He said, "Do not get angry." And then the man repeated the request, "Give me advice." So he said the same thing several times, "Do not get angry." Okay, and this is a Sahih hadith in Bukhari. So how do you look at it? What is the clinical interpretation, anger and emotional regulation? From a psychiatric point of view, the Prophet's advice aligns with the core principles of emotional regulation, meaning that when somebody really upsets you, if you lose control, now there are some people, you've heard a term, they know how to press somebody's buttons, right? And some people actually know how to do it. They will do things, or they will say things and continue to do that so that you get angry. When you get angry, you lose control. When you lose control, they may say something very small, but you are the one who explodes. Everybody looks at you as maybe you did something wrong, where you're just responding to what they did, right? So this is the response to anger. And then cognitive behavioral relevance. What does that mean? The hadith actually anticipates this modern CBT strategies, which is a type of therapy, and I'm pretty sure that Ms. Colhan is going to touch on that, which emphasizes in identifying triggers and reframing your thought process. You see a thing, how you respond to it, that is the part that you control, and you learn to control over time before the emotional escalation. So you do not let the emotions take control of you. Anger is a secondary emotion. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, often masking underlying feelings, like you got scared by someone, what they said, or you felt ashamed. How many times does it happen that people feel bad for something that happens, and then what their response is, instead of answering that question, they get angry? How many times does it happen that you call an adult as a child, or somebody in power, over something that they did that was inappropriate? You call them out. And what happens? They get mad at you. Instead of answering the question, they get angry at you. Parents do that all the time to their kids. Impulse control. You control your impulse. You don't. The Prophet said that several times. Do not get angry. What does that mean? You control yourself. You slow yourself down when somebody is trying to make you angry, or certain situation is making you angry. We are supposed to remove ourselves from the situation that makes us angry. And all right, so the spiritual and ethical dimensions. Okay, what does that mean? Islamic ethic, anger is seen as a force that can cloud our judgment and lead to injustice. So when somebody makes you, there's a very famous incident that happened to Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu, who was about to kill a mushrik in a battle, and he was sitting on top of him, and he was going to kill him, and the guy spat in his face. So instead of going ahead and killing him, he removed himself. He left the guy. Why? Because he said that if I had killed you before you spat on me, that would have been for Allah's sake. But after you spat at me, my anger came on, and if I'd killed you, that would not have been for Allah's sake. That would have been for His sake. So I mean, He controlled His anger, right? So okay, so tazkiyah, purification of the soul, restraining anger is part of this spiritual refinement. Okay, it also shows us adab when we are in front of our elders, in front of people that are supposed to be respected. You know, when we control our anger, when we are able to stay calm under provocation, that reinforces our dignity. You know, which we say it lies in restraint. And then moral leadership for physicians, especially. I can't tell you how many times I get this experience. The patients come in and they will sit in front of me and they'll be cursing at me. They'll be questioning my, medical license and other things. So what do? You can't lose your composure. You have to stay composed, no matter what they say, no matter how bad they come. I mean, I've been called Bin Laden, I don't know how many times, because the patient was mad at me. So what do? You just kind of smile at them and you say, okay, once you're calmer, then we can talk more about it. And the same patients, by the time they're ready to go home, the same patients come back and they apologize, But as a professional, as a leader, you cannot lose your composure. You have to keep yourself under control. All right. So let's talk about the physiological effects. Like, how does anger affect our body? Not only anger, just being stressed, just being upset. How does that affect our body? It can increase our heart rate. It can increase our blood pressure. There are so many people who get a heart attack because they got really, really, really mad. They got really angry. Blood pressure went up. People can develop strokes because the blood pressure went up. It also causes hormonal imbalance. So like I mentioned, too much adrenaline in your system, that also increases your blood pressure. That also affects your memory. That also affects your ability to function, right? Cortisol is for people who are constantly, there's some people who just have this thing. They're always angry. They're always angry. So their blood pressure is up, their cortisol is up, causes problems with their body. It weakens the immune system. When you're constantly angry, or when your cortisol and other adrenaline and other enzymes are hormones are high, they will cause immune system to actually go down, right? Causes muscle aches, muscle pain, muscle weakness. People don't realize it, but long-term stress can cause muscle weakness, and then it disrupts sleep. How many times does it happen? Something really upset you, and you can't sleep at night. You're tossing and you're turning and you're thinking about it, and you can't get rid of it because you're so angry. So it affects your sleep, affects your next day. You become irritable. It affects your relationships with other people, right? When you're irritable, what happens when you can't? Have you heard people kick the dog? Term kick the dog. What does that mean? That you're angry at someone else and you can't take it out on them. So what do? You kick the poor dog because they can't do anything to you, right? Similarly, people get angry and they take this anger out on people under them. It could be their wives, it could be their kids, it could be their husband, whoever that's under you, or it could be subordinates at work, which affects your ability to be an effective leader. It causes increased anxiety, causes depression. Depression causes inability to function normally. Like I said, damages interpersonal relationships. You can get mad at someone, your friend, your colleague, or someone, and say things that are inappropriate. That hurts their feelings, and then you don't realize that you have affected them in long term, right? Reduces your emotional resilience. Resilience is what gets us through difficult times. So anger causes that resilience to go down as well. All right. Sorry, this slide is a little messed up. So basically, what it says is that continued anger, continued emotional imbalance can lead to physical illness. Like I mentioned, people can have strokes or heart attacks. It also can cause metabolic syndrome, where the blood glucose goes up, the blood pressure goes up, cholesterol goes up. And it can lead to, what it can lead to also is, like, when people are under a lot of stress, what do? They will do anything to calm themselves down. So sometimes people will go to things that are inappropriate. People may start using drugs. Nowadays, a lot of people think that using marijuana is okay, but that's not true. They are relying on that and other substances like that. So unfortunately, that can lead to other issues related to addiction. All right, so let's talk about what is forgiveness, right? I mean, we keep talking about forgiveness, forgiveness. What is it? Okay, so forgiveness is a conscious, deliberate decision to release feelings of resentment. I may be angry towards someone, I may resent someone, but I am consciously gonna stop being that way, right? Or resentment or vengeance towards a person or a group who has harmed you, regardless of whether they deserve it or not. Okay, so sometimes you may perceive that somebody has hurt you, where they may not be doing anything to hurt you, or they may actually hurt you, right? So you are on purpose, knowingly deciding to forgive them. Okay, is that easy? No. Right? So what does it involve? Letting go of the negative emotions like anger, bitterness, and a desire to revenge. So you decide that I'm not going to take revenge, or I'm not going to hurt them back, or I'm not going to, for instance, if they yelled at you, that I'm not going to yell back at them, right? So you forgive them. What else? Choosing emotional freedom over continued suffering. What does that really mean, emotional freedom? When you are carrying a grudge, when you're carrying anger towards someone, you're actually carrying a load over your shoulder. Somebody may have done something to you and they forgot about it, that they hurt you somehow. But you are carrying that load on your back, constantly thinking about it, constantly ruminating about it, constantly worrying about what they did to you. That's the anger that keeps, when you keep thinking about it, you're not going to be able to let it go. If you stop thinking about it, yes, you'll be able to forgive and forget. All right. And then restoring inner peace. Like when you are able to get that monkey off your back, the load off your back, you will feel lighter. You will be able to actually move forward. Okay. Now, sometimes justice is not possible. Sometimes we all get to a position where the person who is hurting us is too powerful, too strong. They have too much power and we can't do anything about it. What do? Right? That's where you leave things up to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Right? Final justice resides with Him. So when you know that, when you realize that, and able to kind of use that positively in your life, then you are actually going to be able to feel lighter. You're going to have the peace of mind, peace of heart, which is the most important thing. So what is forgiveness not, right? It's not that does not mean that somebody who is abusive, who is harmful, that you condone their behavior. Forgiveness does not mean that you say it's okay if somebody's hurting me on purpose. Somebody keeps beating me or taking advantage of me or putting me down. That is not okay. You don't excuse that. Instead, it's a personal act of healing, freeing yourself from the emotional burden of the past. What has happened in the past, you live it in the past, you move forward. Think about it this way. Can you turn around, look back, and move forward? Can you walk forward looking back? No, you're going to run into things. You're going to bump into things. You're going to fall down. So if you don't let go of what has happened, there's so many people that I come across that have been abused. Abuse is nowhere in their life, but they're still carrying that burden on their back. Why? That person is long gone. Either they're dead or out of your life. They don't care, but you are still carrying that they did this to me, and you're carrying that burden on yourself. That is what you have to let go. All right. So forgiveness is more than a moral virtue. It's actually transformative. When you are really able to forgive people, let go of that, right? So psychologically and physiologically, you actually feel lighter in your mind as well as your body. Actually, there's a lot of research that has happened in very big universities, that show that it enhances the mental health, strengthens relationships, promotes physical healing. Think about it this way, like, between husband and wife, arguments happen all the time. Now, if you carry a grudge, if you kind of carry this, oh, my wife said this to me, yesterday, or my husband said that to me yesterday, and you're carrying that, what's going to happen? When you see each other, you're going to argue about it. But if you let go of it, there's a good chance that you're not going to think about it, and the relationship is going to continue, right? But if you keep arguing or bickering over small things that you carry in your heart because they said something or did not say something or forgot something, right? What's going to happen? That's going to create bigger problems, Um, So okay, so let's explore a little bit more about how forgiveness fosters personal growth and well-being, right? So as I mentioned, psychological benefits forgiveness reduces stress, reduces anxiety, reduces depression, or keeps you from going there, becoming depressed, becoming anxious, right? Enhances emotional regulations and resilience, like I mentioned earlier, increases satisfaction from life, right? Things that you can change around you, as many things as you can decrease the stress level, the better chance of you having a more wholesome, full life. People who forgive actually live a better life, not necessarily longer life. Yes, longer life. Life comes from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We have measured lives, right? But you will be more satisfied, more wholesome life. That's what's important. It promotes empathy and compassion. You feel like how other people are feeling, and like I mentioned, the things that go up, they come down. Blood pressure goes down. Immune system improves, enhances sleep quality. May reduce chronic pain. Like when people are constantly stressed out or depressed and anxious, what happens? Their muscles stay tight. They stay stiff. They have chronic aches and pains. They can't relax. Right. So when you're able to forego and forgive, you are able to actually relax. So now this is the important part. People think that okay, forgiveness is something that things that you can actually learn, right? Forgiveness can be taught. There are studies done at big universities. Stanford did a project. Yale has done projects. Harvard has projects. I mean, you can go and do research, and you'll find out that these things actually can be learned. You can learn to forgive. Okay, it's not that okay, well, I'm trying but I can't forgive. No, you have to have the mindset, you have to have the desire to do so, right? Um, so so involves releasing resentment, like I said, reclaiming emotional freedom, supporting long-term emotional and physical health. So emotions and physical health, they are connected directly. People with psychiatric illnesses, for instance, that are uncontrolled, they end up dying from medical conditions more often than people of the same gender, same age without having psychiatric illnesses. It's not the psychiatric illness kills, it's uncontrolled illness causes a more, immune system to go down. And this is not something that just with the Muslims, right? It's not just Islamic idea, forgiveness. Islam emphasizes, of course, mercy, emulating Allah's forgiveness. If you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to forgive you, you want to forgive his creation. Judaism has the same thing. It's integral in their religion, the repentance and community and healing. That's part of the forgiveness. Of course, in Christianity, the central focus is in Jesus' teaching. Think of divine grace and inner peace. And then in Buddhism, is the same thing again, like encouraging to letting go of anger to reduce suffering. So it's not just Islam, it's any religious practice that people that really follow religion, they will have that as a core principle, forgiveness. Okay, so what does forgiveness do? It encourages introspection and humility, strengthens the relationship, social bonds, fosters spiritual development, builds capacity, compassion, and moral maturity. Again, like when you're mature, you are able to actually forgive and move on with the same people. You don't stop talking to people who have hurt you or slighted you in some way. All right, so how to cultivate forgiveness? You practice empathy, meaning you understand what other people are feeling, and perspective taking, meaning how they are looking at things from their perspective. Again, like two people can have the same experience but come out with different outcomes or different perspective, right? So try to understand, as I say, be in other people's shoes to see what they feel. Use mindfulness and meditation. We talked about that last time. Be mindful of what's going on rather than knee-jerk response. Think about what's going on. Think about what somebody's saying, why somebody's saying that. Maybe I said something that hurt somebody else's feeling, and they're just kind of responding to it, right? So instead of just kind of going tit for tat, stop, think before you respond. Like think for a few seconds before you give a negative response, especially. Engage in journaling. Journaling actually is writing down your feelings. That helps a lot. And I think Ms. Terry is going to be able to talk more about that. Guided reflection, again, that's another technique where you actually are able to kind of think about, things that are going around you. And then seek therapy. When you can't do it yourself, sometimes it's better to go to a professional and ask for help. It's okay to go and ask for help. That actually prevents things from getting worse, right? Because we can't necessarily, if I'm hurt, it'd be very difficult for me to look at things a certain way or go past certain things. So I can have a neutral person who's trained to help in those situations, can actually help me get through that process. So conclusion, forgiveness is a powerful tool for healing and transformation. It benefits mind, body, and spirit that we talked about. Choosing to forgive is choosing growth, peace, and well-being. You are not stuck in the past. You are not stuck in the trauma phase. You are able to actually move forward. That's the only way you can move forward. If you keep thinking about the trauma and live it, unfortunately, it can go. We can have generational trauma that kind of goes from parents, grandparents to parents to their children, and then continues. Somebody has to break the cycle. In order to break the cycle, you have to do something different. If everybody keeps doing the same thing, we are not going to be able to move forward, right? So that's what it is about. Once you're able to do that, break the cycle, you actually can have a more wholesome life. So forgiveness opens door to mercy. So when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created the creation, He wrote in His book, which is with Him on His throne, "Verily my mercy prevails over my wrath." And this is Hadith Qudsi. So we all seek, Allah's mercy, hoping through it that He'll forgive us and our shortcomings and will grant us Jannah, right? When we extend mercy to His creation and forgive others sincerely, then we nurture the hope of receiving His divine mercy in return, right? So if we want His mercy, we got to be merciful to His creation. For through the compassion and forgiveness that we draw near to the most merciful, which is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Thank you. Jazakallah khair for your attention.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you, Dr. Arif, for this amazing, very informative and amazing presentation. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless you. I'd like to request Ms. Terry you can begin right away. Is that mic fine, or you want this one? So, if you can press and okay, yeah. We'll take that one, and you can take this one.
Oh, great. Okay. Let's see. Test. Okay. Good evening. My name is Terry, and I feel very honored to be able to speak to you this evening on a topic that I work with quite a bit. I'm a therapist. I work with adults and children, and I would say that the majority of the patients that I work with do have some issues with trauma. And trauma is kind of a difficult word to put into one definition. Trauma is usually perpetrated by human behavior, or it can be from a natural event like a flood or a hurricane or an earthquake or a car accident. Trauma can happen to us in childhood as continuous trauma. It can happen just one time in a major event that harms us. But one thing that trauma has in common in those situations is that it affects the nervous system. And if you think about the nervous system, that is exactly how we perceive, how we interpret or feel the different events that are going on in our lives. We're either, it's through our nervous system that we either feel emotions, we feel important things like love and experience our experiences. But at the same time, through the nervous system, it also has an important job too, to alert us to threat. And that's the part of the nervous system that I'm going to talk about, because sometimes it can actually hijack us, and it starts doing stuff with our body that we didn't ask our body to do. So when speaking about the nervous system, that's the lens that I'm going to use to explain the trauma experiences and what's going on in the body. And then we'll talk about healing, and then we'll get to forgiveness. But when you hear the term window of tolerance, that just means that your nervous system is operating at a point where you can tolerate some stress. Some people's stress level, or how much stress they tolerate, just depends on that person and, you know, what's been going on in their life. And we call that window of tolerance just that. And it can be kind of small, like children. They don't have a capacity for too much stress, especially babies. And then as we get older, that window of tolerance can get longer. However, stress is going to disrupt the whole nervous system. It's just going to, it's just going to take everything and shake it up. So when we have stress, our window of tolerance goes in. So it's hard. When we have trauma, our window of tolerance kind of goes in, so we can't handle the amount of stress that we had. And the reason for that is it's hijacked. Your window of tolerance gets more narrow, and the trauma actually keeps you in a state of stress. It sort of disrupts the whole system, and you stay in, you never get to the place where you can truly relax. And that's a part of the nervous system that's one name that they call it in this one lens of the nervous system is the ventral vagal system. And that's where you experience safety, security, social engagement. That's when you're with your families, your children, you feel love, you feel gratitude. And that's very important, that part of the nervous system. The next part of the ladder would be the sympathetic, and that's the biggest part. That's the one that's tasked with keeping us safe and recognizing threat. And then the third part is when I just call it the third part. It's basically called a dorsal vagal, and that's where we sort of relax. In a healthy response there, that's where you don't have a lot of energy, but you're comfortable, and you can be sleeping and that's when it's a healthy response. When it's an unhealthy response, as all three of these have, this would be the part where you're depressed, you just don't engage with people, you feel isolated, you feel disconnected, you feel depressed. And so when we're working in our window of tolerance and we lose self-control, and switching back to the window of tolerance now, because it involves pretty much one part of your nervous system, which is the second one, the sympathetic. When you start to feel stress and you can't handle it and you become dysregulated, that means you are out of your window of tolerance, and you start to show reactive emotions like crying, like yelling, like fighting. And for you to return back to a calm state is interfered with a traumatic experience that the body has internalized. So so as you keep this trauma, or it's part of your life, or you're carrying around this big weight, you know, it's going to affect all the other good parts of the nervous system. And that's where working with a therapist is helpful. A lot of times, people, when they have trauma, will stop feeling their feelings, and that includes even positive feelings. They just want to numb out their feelings so they don't feel that trauma. And back to the window of tolerance, where the disrupted nervous system now is going to be very reactive. It's never going to fully react. And so you can be in a very tense state of mind, and you may not even be aware of it unless somebody points it out to you, or you start noticing, like Dr. Shoaib was saying, the tight muscles, the headaches, the tight neck, or digestive problems. All those kinds of things are tied into the nervous system. And one way I can see that trauma is present is if I see a lot of big reactions out of a client or a patient. And so when we start our path to healing, you know, a lot of times it needs to be processed. The event needs to be processed. It needs to be identified in the sense of what it feels like and where are the areas in your life that it's affecting, primarily with you first. And some traumas, you know, just take time to unwind and untangle and talk about. And then other traumas seem to resolve a little bit easier. It just depends on the intensity level of the trauma and how long it had been going on. But trauma also affects how you relate to other people and how you relate to yourself. A lot of times it can just steal your confidence. It can inhibit your cognitive processes, and it can keep you on a negative bias in that you think only bad things are going to happen to me. You start having self-beliefs that are sort of self-sabotaging. And that's why in therapy, it's very, very important that, you know, it get treated properly, and that you take your time with it. Trauma isn't something that you can just kind of race through, but it's also something that you want to be careful and work when you're working on it, that you don't do it in a way that re-traumatizes you by reliving some of the experiences. So that's why it's helpful to go to a therapist and work on it from that perspective. One of the things that happens in trauma too is that we feel a lot of guilt, a lot of anxiety, and a lot of shame. And so there's a process in the trauma where we work on self-forgiveness. A lot of times victims will blame themselves. They'll say it was, you know, I did this to myself. I put myself in a dangerous situation. So there is a process through self-forgiveness that's a process that goes on at the same time as while we work on other aspects of it. But that's a very important step, to realize that there's things that we need to release, and that we need to recognize that there's even besides the guilt and blaming ourselves, then there's also a part of us that we start to abandon. So there's some self-abandonment issues that come up also in trauma. But as you start the path towards healing, it's also a journey of there's self-revelation, there's growth, there's insight that you pick up, and yes, trauma does change you, but once it resolves and you've started that healing process, or you're getting through that healing process, you will be pleasantly surprised at a lot of things that you're going to be able to let go of in the healing process. And the last part of our healing process too is to look at forgiveness of the either the event, whether it was caused by a natural event or whether it was human behavior who instigated the trauma that we were left to live with. And that, I think, forgiveness is one of the things that is probably one of the most difficult things in our lives to do, but at the same time, it also, I like the word that Dr. Shoaib used, it shows mercy, but it also shows kindness to ourselves. And being able to let go and heal from the trauma, and as the last step, as in forgiveness, and whether that person is still around, whether that person is deceased, or whether that person is still alive, it's still important to do something that's sort of like a ritual once you get to that point of forgiveness. And in that sense, by ritual, I mean like a little ceremony, whether you write a letter and then later burn the letter, or you write a letter of forgiveness, maybe to someone who's not around, and just keep the letter to remind yourself that you have done one of the most difficult things a human can do, which is to forgive a perpetrator, if that's the case. And the last thing I was going to add about forgiveness, that it's a process of letting go. That's a final step in letting go and being able to free yourself from the trauma. It's a component of being able to, live your life more freely, so that you can attain mental, emotional, spiritual, and relational freedom. And of course, that would put us, in that primary area of being able to really thrive again. So forgiveness of ourselves, self-forgiveness, and then also forgiveness of others is the minute that we start to thrive in our lives. And I know we're going to have some Q&A, and I guess we'll just go ahead and open for any questions. But I thank you all for listening. Oh.
Thank you so much, Ms. Terry. Sorry, give me a...
Who wants to be the first person to ask a question? I know that's, yes, ma'am. Excuse me? Sorry. That's a good question. It continuously, that's hard to do, because in a sense, it almost feels like you're excusing their behavior when they're causing pain in your life. And in a case like that, if it's a spouse and you can go for some kind, that person needs help. A lot of times, people who've been hurt or have experienced trauma themselves will end up being the ones to cause it in other people. And also, if sometimes when people who are angry, sort of engage in important people that they have relationships with, and there's a big differential of power. But if it's at all possible to go for some kind of religious counseling, speaking to someone where you participate in religious ceremony, if there's someone who is available that counsels, that might be the first step. There, in raising that person's awareness, sometimes they won't listen to you. So in order for that person to be a better person and also develop an awareness, you would have to seek a third party, which I would suggest, someone in the religious community who could sit down with this person and hear an important message from someone that they might have respect for, or that could have more of an equal, instead of a power differential, they would be seen as equals. But very important too, maybe even more important, is for you to keep yourself as safe as possible, and whatever you can do to remove yourself from the room or detach yourself from any type of verbal abuse or things like that. Does that start to answer your question? Okay. Exactly.
And every time you go and say, okay, I'm going to get home together, I'm going to talk to you, he's going to come around and she's going to come around and do the same thing.
It sounds like that there's a pattern of behavior. And the sad thing is, if there are children, they're observing that. And that's a problem. So definitely, I hope you have like close women friends or women relatives that you can confide in. You need to be sort of affirmed, and you need to be validated yourself. And women understand this. So you need to like, or what I would suggest is that you build a little bit of a support network there. And at the same time, that's to give you support. But at the same time, if this spouse won't listen to you, do you know another relative, a male relative, that can possibly sit down and talk to him? I just feel like there is a solution. This isn't hopeless, but there may be different avenues of getting to a solution. And in this case, I just think it's a matter of somebody communicating with them in a way that he understands. Because it's so wrong it's so wrong.
Jazakallah khair. Thank you so much, Ms. Terry, and thank you for that amazing, very good question. Quickly, I just wanted to touch base on from an Islamic perspective as well, that covers the part of forgiveness. And why forgiveness is so important, because a lot of times we are suffering internally, and the reason for that suffering is not necessarily something that's physical, but it's more so of something that we've gone through, and someone may have hurt us, said something to us, and we're just holding that grudge for a very, very long time. Sometimes we sit in counseling and we come across these, we come across many of these situations. A husband and wife, for instance, 10 years of marriage, and The wife was suffering all this time and she was never really able to fully 100% give in to this marriage because of what the husband did in the first year of marriage. And for all these years, she was just holding it on the inside. She could never, they never talked about it. She never addressed it. She never healed from that. And because of that, she was never able to be fully into this marriage and she was suffering. And she never forgave the other person because she never really addressed it. Or for instance, a lot of times we come across counseling and we come across situations where a person who went through some type of trauma, and that trauma could be in your childhood, when you were a teenager, when you were a child, and you probably went through something. I went through something. We all went through something, and especially those who come from Asian countries, we had some type of trauma. At least nowadays, in our time, everything is considered trauma, right? Even if, especially for this Gen Z, even if the parent yells at you, "Oh, this is traumatic," everything is considered trauma for them. But I'm talking about some real abuse. Many people have gone through some real type of abuse as childhood, in their early adulthood or teenage years, and they never really talked about it. They never really addressed it. They never really, and a lot of times it just keeps coming in and it builds that resentment, that grudge, that hatred type of feeling. And sometimes we think that in order for me to heal from that, it needs to be addressed with that person. That I need some type of validation, right? So what if I forgive them? They're still going to be the same. It's not like it's going to change anything, right? Okay, I forgive them. So what? What now? Now, I was reading a book, and interesting part in that book was that forgiveness. It says something like forgiveness is both a decision and a process as well. And Dr. Arif, Shoaib, and Terry also mentioned this as well. He used a very good term. It was a better term. What's it called? Forgiveness, is it? You continuously continue to forgive. What was the term? I'm sorry. It's a process, yes. So forgiveness is something that doesn't take place overnight, right? You may come across a situation and you may went through some type of traumatic experience, and over the years, because it was never resolved, it was never healed, it took seat in your heart, and it took place, and it became stronger and stronger, and you let it because you ignored it all these years. And when you ignored it, what happened was it became stronger and it kind of became a part of you and it changed your personality. Miss Terry was talking about the parasympathetic and sympathetic part of the mind. It kind of took over that part of your mind, and that became normal to you. That became normal to you, that this is who I am, this is what it is, and this is very normal. Whereas that may not be the norm. And continuing to live in the past and not really addressing it is doing what to us? It's robbing us. It literally robs us from our freedom, from our peace, that we can't really or truly enjoy anything. We can't really move on because we're just stuck in the past and constantly thinking about this person. So that's why, and that's where forgiveness really comes in, and understanding this very important point about forgiveness is, when you make this decision to forgive the other person, it's not because of them. You're not forgiving them. You're not doing for them. You're not allowing or approving that or whatever is it. Forgiveness is a decision that I need to make for myself, because I deserve that freedom. I deserve that peace, and I need to move on. It's not for the other person. It's not for your abuser. It's not for them. It is actually for you. And the truth of the matter is, yes, if it's something that demands some type of justice, of course, but other than that, if it's something that really cannot be changed and nothing can be done about it, the only person that's going to continue to suffer is just you and nobody else. So that's why it's very important to understand that forgiving the other person or forgiveness in general with in regards to other people, it's not necessarily for them. It is actually for us, for my peace, for my freedom, for my sanity, for me to move on. For me to move on. And in the Quran, there are many verses. Interestingly, in the Quran, Allah Azza wa Jal talks about the process as well. Allah Azza wa Jal talks about it as well. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Ali Imran, فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ وَشَاوِرْهُمْ فِي الْأَمْرِ فَإِذَا عَزَمْتَ فَتَوَكَّلْ عَلَى اللَّهِ إِنَّ اللَّهَ يُحِبُّ الْمُتَوَكِّلِينَ. This is actually a whole step-by-step process that is mentioned in the Quran. So first he says, فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ. So forgive them. So فَاعْفُ عَنْهُمْ is continuous forgiveness. It is a process of me saying that I continue to forgive them. And every time you are reminded of it, every time you say that I forgive them, I forgive them. And you need to practice forgiveness. It's not a one-time thing. Just because I say, okay, I forgive them, and you said it one time, I forgive them, nothing's going to change immediately, instantly, or nothing's going to change overnight. Change doesn't happen overnight to begin with. So you have to practice forgiveness. Every time your thoughts take over, those negative thoughts start to creep in. Every time you're being troubled, what do? You remind yourself, I've moved on, I've healed, and I forgive them. And then the next part, وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ, and make forgiveness for them as well. Make a prayer for them as well. You don't know what their situation is. You know, a lot of times, especially when it comes to our youngsters and youth, especially from our countries, we have a lot of unresolved traumatic type of events that we tend to talk about in regards to our parents. In regards to our parents, because sometimes not the young ones. I'm talking about the adult ones, those who went through the hard life. The younger generation has issues. Oh, I went through a traumatic experience because I have to go through the whole weekend without Wi-Fi. That's not trauma, my brother. We went to a hotel and there was no internet. Oh my God. No, that's not a traumatic experience. My mom took away my phone for a whole week. Oh my God, but I don't have a phone. Like, what am I supposed to do? My dad blocked YouTube and I can't access YouTube, and I can't watch any of my videos, and all my games are blocked. My life, it feels like my life has ended. I'm not making this up. I hear these from these kids. I'm telling you, I'm not making this up. I have one of the student, and if you take YouTube away from her life, it is the end. It is the end. And she says, it feels like my life has no meaning and purpose. Oh my God. YouTube's taken and she feels like there's no meaning and purpose in my life. SubhanAllah. So I'm not talking about, sorry to get carried away in this. I'm not talking about this generation. I'm talking about the older generation who actually went through some traumatic experience, right? Especially the struggle of all these raisinghood and, being raised in different countries, such as not the most amazing country such as America, right? So we have a lot of times, because we cannot blame the system, we cannot blame the offender. What do? We end up blaming our parents, because we say that our parents allowed this behavior to happen. And they put me in that situation. What kind of parents do that to their children? What kind of father or mother allows this? So first and foremost, understanding that whatever our parents did, they did the best they could given the circumstances they were in. We are in no position to judge, especially our parents. Especially our parents. We have no right to judge them, subhanAllah. They did the best they could in the situation, circumstances they were in. So, quickly moving on from this is, a lot of times we tend to blame our parents for all these years, and especially youngsters. And we don't really move on for this. So the point that I was trying to get, number two, is kind of putting that and not really getting too affected by it. And understanding and giving the benefit of the doubt to the other person. Maybe they did this, and maybe my parents did this, or maybe that person, I'm not really talking about a serial abuser, right? Just in general, when we blame people for not really any reason whatsoever, but giving the benefit of the doubt, maybe they did it because that's all they knew. For instance, my parents came to this country. They were immigrants 20 years ago. They put us into school and they weren't really aware of the system. And it was a horrible experience for us. We didn't know. And for years we would blame our parents, but little did I know after so many years that the whole culture was a cultural shock for them as well, not just me. Because they were immigrants, they didn't know the system as well. So they were just, it was a first time for them as well. So they did the best to their ability, but I never saw that through. I never understood that until I became an adult myself. So understanding and giving benefit of the doubt. And that's why step number 2 is making prayer for them. Every time you remember something difficult, something hurtful, something painful that involves a person, say, "Oh Allah, I forgive them." And the next part is, "Ya Allah, you forgive them too." For maybe they didn't know what they did. Oh Allah, you forgive them. وَاسْتَغْفِرْ لَهُمْ, and make forgiveness for them. وَشَاوِرْهُمْ, and include them in your affairs. And when you make forgiveness for them as well, be more kind towards them. Never to avoid the person, but to avoid the situation where you are not placed in the same circumstances or same situations where you can be abused again. Because people do change. People become better. People do change and people become better. There are many stories from the life of the Prophet ﷺ, and many verses mentioned in the Quran. وَلْيَعْفُوا وَلْيَصْفَحُوا أَلَا تُحِبُّونَ أَنْ يَغْفِرَ اللَّهُ لَكُمْ, and let them forgive and let them reconcile. Would you not like that Allah or God forgives you? Would you not want that God forgives you for your transgression that you do every single day? So forgive them, subhanAllah. Many more, subhanAllah, verses mentioned in the Quran, and many more from the life of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. In fact, this was the nature, this was the prophetic sign and the symbol of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that the more you provoke Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the messenger of Allah, the more kind and compassionate he will be towards you. And that was the nature of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That was his nature. And we learned that in many instances, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi, especially during the time of the conquest of Mecca, when all the people who took the property, who took the lives, who hurt the Prophet's family, who tried to assassinate the Prophet and the Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when we had the upper hand and when he entered that very same city that expelled him, and upon entering that city, how was he described? He was described as sitting on his camel upon the entrance of that very city, with his head lowered and his body humbled towards the ground and looking down. And everyone else who were considered the offender and the abuser of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was looking and talking about, What is he going to do today? How is he going to punish us? Is he going to expel us? What kind of torture and punishment are we going to? Is he going to go easy on us? How difficult will it be? Some even flee. Some left the city because they knew what they did. And they thought that this prophet or messenger was just a common man. Of course, we did so wrong to him, so it just makes sense that he would do the same. It's normal. We did the same. Now he has an upper hand. He's going to do the same. But little did they know that they were dealing with not just any man, but a prophet and a messenger of Allah. Some even left the city out of the fear. But the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, what Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he says, "La tathriba alaykum al-yawm." Today is not the day of recompense. Today is not the day of revenge. Today I will not take making things equal and square. Today there will be no recompense and no revenge. There is forgiveness, public forgiveness for everyone, subhanAllah. And he forgave. And if you were to read the stories of the same people, the horrible things they did to Rasulullah, to his family, to his daughters, to his companions, to his loved ones. Whereas the way he treated them in return really makes him a prophet and a messenger of Allah. And the Prophet ﷺ forgave them. So that's why we can make a choice to continue to just live in the past and hurt ourselves and never really move on. Or that we can kind of try to just move on, not for the sake of the person who've hurt and offended you, but for your own sake. We ask Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to accept it on our behalf. Forgive us if we went too over. Does anybody have any questions? We're going to take about just 1 or 2 or 3 questions. And then, inshallah, we will conclude. I do have some questions online, if that's okay. So some of the questions that I received online, how does forgiveness works? How does forgiveness work when the other person keeps on insulting you, taking advantage of you for not retaliating? What's the fine line? How do we deal with such people? So I think Dr. Arif or anybody can address. How do you forgive the other person when they continue to insult you? And what's the fine line? Where do you draw the line? When you are still maybe in that abusive relationship.
Just trying to let go, maybe.
Right?
Trying to minimize the effect.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would add to that if you are in a situation where the other person continues to insult you, then it's very important for us to set certain boundaries. It's very important for us to set certain boundaries. And if it's something that's a harmful situation, then obviously you need serious help. But if it's a relationship where there is some type of mental, emotional, or maybe verbal abuse, not physical, but if there is some type of a mental and emotional abuse, then you have to protect yourself and you have to understand that there are ways you can address and you can handle this, and you don't have to continue to live even in this emotional and mental abusive relationship. And obviously there's a lot of ways to overcome that. And it's something that we cannot just, that needs to be resolved, right? That needs to be addressed, and you need to know how to manage that type of relationship. And once you learn to do that, then obviously then that aspect and that part of forgiveness kind of kicks in, because forgiveness is mainly about healing. Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
You gotta get someone talk to the abuser to check the abuser and make sure that they can have a with the abuser to listen. It's
gotta be, the law of consequences needs to work.
Mhm.
You wait till you show, it's not like it's checkmate the user and say, hey, you gotta hold it yourself. This can escalate, this can get a lot worse for you. You know, I don't know if you've done domestic violence or cases that have, you get into an area of law that is very complicated and can be very troublesome for the couple. Most often it devastates most couples through that process. So before you get to that level, you've got to demonstrate to the abuser all consequences. In other words, whether it's you need to stop, hold it yourself, otherwise there be some consequences.
Got it. Thank you. Very good. Very good. Anybody has any other questions? So I will just pass on the mic to Dr. Shoaib if he wants to just conclude, and Miss Terry, if you want to just say. The only other question we have is, what if it starts affecting your salah? What if I guess relationship or abusive relationship starts affecting your prayer, your spirituality? And, I responded to the first one, so now it's your turn.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Like brother said earlier, if the abuser continues, I actually recommend the person who's being abused to seek therapy. A lot of times people think about it, they say, okay, well, why should I get therapy while I'm being abused? Actually, therapy does not mean that you're crazy or something is majorly wrong with you and that's why you're being abused. Therapy can actually strengthen you, show you that what you have, how you can stand up to the abuser, and gives you moral courage and the physical courage to be able to actually say, no, this needs to stop. Unfortunately, culturally, what we see is a lot of times people say, okay, well, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will take care of it. Yes, He will take care of it, but there's certain things that you can do. You can reach out to family members. You can reach out to friends or, friends who can intervene that the other person takes seriously. If somebody has a substance abuse problem, for instance, like, people get drunk and they come home and they're belligerent and then they're holy terror for the whole family, the wife, the kids, everybody else. That needs to stop. Actually, you may have to get the law enforcement involved. I see that happen. When somebody has to be put, removed from the house. And sometimes the courts actually make it mandatory for the person to go and get help for their behavior. You don't have to live in this terror. The whole family has to. So something that is affecting your ibadah, your connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So you have to stop and say, hey, why is this happening that is affecting my ability to connect to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Sometimes people get into abuse and they've been praying that this needs to stop, this needs to stop. Oh Allah, please make it stop. Oh God, make it stop. Well, God will make it stop if you take the first step. Maybe you need to leave. Or maybe you need to say that I'm going to leave. Like I said, you have to take first step. I'm not encouraging people to leave their houses and things like, don't take me wrong. But at the same time, there are situations where people should leave. And therapy is not going to tell you, therapist is not going to tell you, hey, get up and leave. No, therapist is going to help you strengthen yourself. Why am I putting up with this? You have to ask that question. And then do something about it. It's not that you can't. If you can't find courage within yourself, going for therapy, reaching out to people, family members, other people may actually help the process. Just feeling helpless or acting helpless will not stop it. You have to take action. And like I said, going for therapy is the first step you can do. And then maybe the other person can see that you are doing something about it, and maybe they will become encouraged to go and get help. Recently, I had a patient admitted to the hospital under my care who was suicidal because his 21-year-old son committed suicide. He became very depressed and he wanted to kill himself. But he could not talk to his family because the whole family was traumatized already because of all of this. So he got to a point where he actually was going to kill himself. Police got involved, brought him to the hospital. He got on medication, started feeling better within a few days. And that gave him courage for the rest of the family to actually go get help because they saw him get better. If he can get help, then we can get help. So somebody has to take the first step, right? Somebody has to say, okay, no, this needs to change. This needs to stop. If you keep doing the same thing over and over again, you can't expect different results, right? So something has to stop. The generational trauma that goes on from one family member to the next one has to stop. But somebody has to put, an end to it. Somebody has to say, no, I am better than this. No, this needs to stop. You forgive after all of that stops. You don't continue to take it and say, okay, well, someday it's going to stop. Yes, someday it's going to stop, but you're hurting yourself and the family members, right? So yes, sometimes you have to put a hard stop to it. Take a definitive action that will stop it, because otherwise it's going to continue, I hope that I convey the point.
Would you like to just conclude and say remarks?
No.
Okay, thank you so much for everybody for being here, for your participation and questions. And thank you, Ms. Terry, for the amazing, informative, educational presentation. We're so grateful for you being here today. And Dr. Arif Shoaib, thank you. Jazakallah khair. Subhanallah bihamdi, subhanakallahumma bihamdik, nashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayk. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.